Welcome back to the Gold Newsletter. Thank you so much for joining us here for another interesting discussion now with Fireweed Metals CEO Brandon Macdonald. My name's Kai Hoffmann. I'm the JR Mining Guy, and together with Brien Lundin, we're relaunching this Gold Newsletter channel, reintroducing some of the stories that we're personally following. I'm a shareholder of Fireweed Metals, and Brandon is a good personal friend of mine as well. So a great story to launch or relaunch the channel with. Lots of excitement around that story as well. Zinc, but it's also tungsten. Quite interesting, critical and defense metals. So we'll dive a little deeper, reintroduce the story, but also talk about catalysts, obviously. Why do we think this is interesting? Why are we invested? And why are the Lundins invested in this story? Let me bring my guest on here already. Brandon, it's great to see you. Thanks for coming to the studio.
Yeah, good to be here.
Absolutely. Yeah, we got to reintroduce the story a little bit. And I've noticed in a lot of the interviews, because I'm so close to them, we forget to talk about actually who you are. Right, because a lot of new viewers, new channel now. Let's start with like 30,000 foot view of Fireweed.
Well, and you know what's interesting is Brien has, I think, was one of the original newsletter writers that wrote us up and has stuck with us through thick and thin. And now that it looks like success is crystallizing, I think it validates his thesis all along. And we launched the company on a McMillan Pass zinc lead silver project. Grew that from 50 square kilometers to 900 square kilometers, kind of around this exploration thesis that this was part of a broader district. The two original deposits we bought, Tom and Jason, we published a resource in 2018 there that kind of showed a combined, resource that was enough to be one of the top 25, zinc lead projects in the world, which is a good place to be in, and in a world where there's 800 to 1,000 zinc lead mines globally, right? But this discovery we made in the new land that we picked up as we went along, at the boundary zone, has kind of shown that we're targeting becoming sort of a top 10, right, or a top 10 global producer, certainly. Boundary zone, what was originally kind of almost a cast off from Teck, and we bought it off them for peanuts. We found some mineralization there that was initially not expected, and that built a thesis within our geological team of like, okay, what are we seeing? Why is it interesting? If this is here, where might we find more like that? And that led to the discovery of a subzone called Boundary West. It's just been amazing the discoveries we've made there, and how the center of mass of the project is shifting. And now this is quickly emerging to be the preeminent zinc exploration district globally. I don't think there's really any question around that. That's the zinc lead silver project, and not to rest on our laurels. Last year we signed an LOI, and then we closed a deal this year that saw us acquire the neighboring project, which is Mactung, which is a tungsten project. Which, without exaggeration, we talk about Mac Pass, the zinc project, being potentially top 10 globally. Mactung very likely would be the largest tungsten mine in the world, or certainly maybe second or potentially third, right? Like it is a freak of nature in terms of tungsten deposits, certainly outside of China, and very topical these days. I did critical and strategic metals, and tungsten right at the high, very top of the list for the U.S. in particular. It's interesting how, as a company, so different than what we launched on. But just this constant iteration and evolution that's seen us, amass so much value.
Absolutely. But you haven't changed course at all. You've just added to it, and it's just you added more meat to the bone. Right? Yeah.
Well, and be opportunistic, right? And this is a key thing is that you can have a great strategy. We published the resource on the Tom and Jason deposits. We published a PEA on those, and the strategy was to then shift to infill, PFS, permitting, etc.
I was going to ask you, right? what is the business plan now also for the company in general, right? So maybe we can tie that together.
Yeah, so we did that for Tom and Jason, or we were going to do that, and then we made this discovery at Boundary Zone and realized, okay, we got to take a step back to take 2 steps forward, right? So our next study on those two, and we'll do a resource for Mac Pass, which will include Tom, Jason again, which will have grown. And another new deposit, End Zone, which is not terribly big, but Boundary Zone, which is the big giant, will be included as well. So that's going to be substantially different. That'll be Q1 next year, most likely, and that'll lead to a new PEA that'll include all of that Q3, 4 next year, potentially Q1 2025.
May I ask why that lag?
It's quite involved. The mine. First off, we went from resource at Tom and Jason to the PEA on there in about 4 months, and it was not enough time.
Okay. It was that was in 2018, right? Just to put a frame around it.
Yeah, it was rushed, right? and I think if we hadn't set ourselves that deadline of May that year, it probably would have been more likely to be published in July. It was not fully baked, right? And I mean, ultimately we decided to put it out because the numbers were good enough, right? And to be clear, what I mean by not fully baked, I don't mean there's no lack of credibility in that study, but we could have optimized it further. There was more economics to be had there, but I was kind of like, the economics are good. We promised it now. Like, if we want to have a bigger summer program and raise more money, we got to get this out now, right? So we made that decision to accelerate it. And I think in this case, for next year's resource and economic study, we want to take our time. There's 2 additional deposits to be integrated. There's so many more considerations around scheduling and center of mass and open pit versus underground, and it's a
lot more engineering work.
Yeah, it is a lot more complicated, and we really want to make sure we make the right choice on that one, because as you go from like a 1 deposit, you might have 1 deposit that's open pit, or maybe you have 1 deposit underground. You've got some scheduling or stockpiling for the open pit one. Those are relatively straightforward. You should be able to go from a resource to a PEA pretty quick. But when you've got 4 deposits, each of which has very positive merits, you're making choices about what gets pushed to year 15 or 20 or whatever, right? So it's definitely want to measure twice and cut once on that.
It sounds like already really detailed work that you're doing for the PEA. So what's stopping you from jumping straight to PFS? Is it really okay?
Yeah,
it's the drilling limitation.
And this is like the Hollywood problem of having a really big deposit or project as a junior. Is it's hungry, needs a lot of money. You define a big resource. Well, now you need a lot of infill, right? So and the jump from inferred to indicated can be 3 to 4 times as much drilling, right? So you think about how much drilling we've done in the last 4 years. Well, imagine like that much times 3, right? So the jump to PFS is material, and we've often thought about kind of thinking about this PEA as a little bit of a PEA plus, which is to say that it's built on a resource that's largely inferred, but there's going to be a tremendous amount of it that's done to a PFS standard.
Okay, PFS is really detailed. What's the level of deviation from a PFS you're allowed? Is it 20%? Because FS is 15, I think.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. It's I think that perhaps the whole plus or minus percentage thing is so thumbsucky.
Because once you get into production or construction,
I think I've liked the description of like a PEA is what could be, a PFS is what should be, and a FS is what will be, right? and so that's the difference, I think, where a PEA is still pretty speculative, right?
Absolutely.
So
yeah. Well, you have the advantage now. You have the finance monkey off your back. Right.
Yeah.
So you've just raised another $16.5 million.
Yeah.
Right. You want to run us through how that all came together? Because I think it's a really interesting part of this story is that you've sort of escaped the. It's called the death spiral. Like a lot of the companies, you've had some financing issues in the past. Just because you're a smaller Zinc explorer, you've solved that issue.
Yeah, well, a big challenge for any junior mining company is financing risk. Is like, when's it going to be financed and on what terms, right? And people waiting in the wings for the financing with the full warrant and the big discount, right? And what we've very clearly told the market now is starting in December last year when the Lundin family invested $20 million. And coming in as a major cornerstone shareholder, they still agreed to a 5% discount to market with no warrant, right? So, and this last financing was done at market, right? No warrant, right? So that this made it abundantly clear to people who are in the sidelines that if your plan is to wait until I need the money and grind me on terms, that's not it. You're never going to own Fireweed shares.
No.
And so it hopefully takes, because so often you pull buying out of the market into the treasury to finance, right? And in this case, it allows us to make sure that doesn't happen.
Absolutely. Let's go through to discuss the the why,
Yeah.
right? Like you've attracted some big caliber names, the Lundin family, one of them, but you also have another large personal or private shareholder out of the US as well. Like what are they seeing? Like what's their end goal, and how does it align with your end goal?
Yeah, I think, well, the nice thing is, Larry Childress out of the U.S. and same with the Lundin families, they're not traders. They're in this for the long haul, whatever that strategy may be. Sometimes the strategy, you define it, but then it can either be tweaked or it can be a completely emergent strategy as the situation changes. I think that they see that they want to push forward with the growth of the company, and if there's a takeout there at the right price, great. If not, then you've got credible mine builders behind us, and you've also got Tech Resources, who owns 8.5% of the company. They sold us part of the project for 1.5 million shares, but now I think own 12 million shares, right? So they've bought most of their shares in the market, or not, sorry, in financings.
Well, it's like their backyard as well. They can't have that go.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I mean, in terms of zinc projects and Western North America, they got a pretty good handle on it.
Do you have a good relationship with them?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, and the nice thing is here we are sitting, just west of Burrard Street, and they're just east of Burrard Street, and I'm just another block beyond that. So it's super great when one of your shareholders, is a major miner in the space, and you can, meet them for lunch, or you can pop over, So I think it's, they want to see the project succeed. Maybe they're eventual owners, but if they're not eventual owners, there'll certainly be off takers. Yeah. Right, so with their smelter in southern British Columbia, so whatever the outcome, they want to see the project succeed. So they've never had any problem being a sounding board for technical ideas. They were gracious enough to invite our team up to Red Dog for a tour there, of which we learned a lot there about how they operate and the geology.
Very similar, actually, right? A lot of similarities.
Yeah. Very similar genetic, sort of between the deposits in terms of how they were formed, right? So, which then leads to how you explore for them.
Okay, fantastic. I think that sort of covers the introduction of the story. Yeah. I think we've covered a lot of the boxes. Let's get to the here and now. What's happening on the ground right now? I've had the chance to visit late or mid-July as well, so there's a lot of drilling going on. I think you had 6 drills on the property at the 5 or 6?
5, yeah.
5, right? At Boundary primarily. So catch us up. What have you been up to this summer? What's the goal of this season, and what can we expect?
We launched with a 16,000 meter target. With the financing we just did, we raised that to like 23,000 meters. A lot of extra money also being spent prepping for an early start next year. We're now at around 20,000, I think, of the 23,000. Or actually, maybe.
What is it? It's early September, so you got like 4 weeks before it gets a little, I wouldn't say iffy, but the weather might be challenging.
We'll have 2 drills offline within the next 2 weeks, I think. Another one a week or so after that, and stage shutdown, right? Yeah. So the intent for sure. We recognize it's better to start early than end late, in no small part because of daylight. Okay. Right, so the equinoxes are March and September, right? So running between the equinox is best because you've got at least 12 hours of daylight. But running between late September and March is you can have very scant daylight up there, right? Which makes it, particularly when you've got if you've got any heli rigs, really impossible, because your night shift gets longer and longer and longer, and your day shift gets shorter and shorter and shorter, right? So just not practical.
Try staffing for that.
Yeah, exactly, right? So point being is that what we're going to try to do is we'll have 23,000-ish meters by the end of the season, maybe a little bit more, shouldn't be less. We've got about less than 10 holes out from the year, even though we're going to complete, I think, 65 on the year. Okay. So we've got a tremendous amount of drill results coming. Labs have been reasonably quick. What
does that mean? Put that in context. Well, last year was awful.
3 to 4 weeks from us.
Oh, that's not bad.
From leaving site. Now it takes 3 weeks with the current amount of core we're processing. It takes 3 weeks for a hole to be done and it to leave site, right? So you're still looking at 6 to 7 weeks in total
2 months turnaround,
when a hole completes. But if we're finishing our last hole in the very early bits or maybe mid-ish October, we should have final results December.
Yeah. What's the target of the current campaign? So obviously 5 drills at Boundary.
Yeah.
we got to talk about Mactung in a minute. I just realized, because Boundary is getting all the action in terms of drilling, it always falls to the wayside. But what's the goal at Boundary?
Yeah, I mean, it's not all Boundary, right? So there's a couple holes at Jason. There's more than a couple holes at Tom, right? So Jason, we're targeting Jason South. There's a fault offset of that lens that has no resource on it that we needed some drill intersections into. That's ongoing right now. Tom, there's Tom West to put some holes into. Tom Deeps, which is, we think, in a fault offset of Tom West. Is
that where the drill was, right underneath the core shack?
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's one of the Tom West runs. Tom Deeps is like if you're at the core shack and you go up that hill to the plateau above. No. So you drill from there to Tom Deeps.
Gotcha. We flew over that.
Yeah. So they're low, or they're deep holes, but for the first time ever, we're using directional drilling, which allows you to do a parent hole and then kind of wedge off it. Without having to re-drill all the way from surface again. So that's actually been incredibly effective, and we're extremely happy with how that's gone. And it's you think about sometimes, okay, what's my dollar cost per meter? But a good way to think about it as well is like your dollar cost per equivalent meter, right? Because if you didn't have a directional drill and had to re-drill those holes from surface, you'd be drilling an extra 600 meters per hole, right? So it actually, that you save 600 meters each time you do that.
So what's the dollar equivalent cost then? The dollar equivalent cost?
Well, I think our dollar per meter that last year was pretty expensive, was around 1,100. This year, 850, right? And that's an actual meter.
Is that because of the directional drilling? Or
I think that's per actual meter.
Okay.
So in equivalent meter, and we're not doing a huge amount of directional drilling, but I'm assuming probably $50 less or something like that, right? So
that hasn't.
That's if you looked at the holes that you actually were drilling with directional, it could be 2/3 the price or maybe less, right? So yeah.
Okay. Original question, Boundary. What's the target? Or what's the goal?
The biggest inferred resource we can, right? And understanding that we're not going to get it all. There, as we're seeing this year, as many meters as we put into it this year, have all the step outs hit? I don't know. Certainly, as the time of the last news release, all the step outs had hit. And so, there's clearly more room to grow. We just cannot get it all in this year. So we're going to define a resource, right? It is not everything, and that's important for the investor populace to understand that it's like a snapshot in a point in time, but there's more to come. And same with Tom and Jason. Republish the resources on those and try to define the biggest inferred level resource we can.
Since we're talking about drill results, and Beaver Creek and Denver Gold are coming up next week, do we expect a press release beforehand? No. And let's see if we can get the interview out beforehand as well.
No, I don't think we'll have drill results out by then. I as much as I would like to have made that happen, sometimes you just can't engineer it. It comes when it comes, right?
It's just because this week has been insanely busy.
We're not holding anything back. No secret drill results to put out on the Tuesday morning.
Okay, good. Yeah. No, fantastic. I think that covers Boundary. We need to see what the drill results are. I'm not sure why I changed the camera, but see what the drill results are. Resources then really big catalyst for the whole project itself. Let's talk Macdonald. Real quick, because I don't think you talked about it when you introduced it, but what's the reasoning behind it? Because it is not a zinc, it's a tungsten project. It's a bit different. So just run us through the reasoning and then the next steps for that project.
Yeah, being immediately adjacent to our zinc project, that we saw an opportunity that this is there's operational synergies, there's development synergies, there's social synergies in terms of engagement with First Nations and governments and stuff like that. And we wanted to be in control of who our neighbor was as well, right? So this is a mature project. It's had a feasibility study. It's been through the environmental assessment, had a positive recommendation to proceed to final licensing. So we thought, okay, but maybe we should own this and engage the government through one of their processes, and then came out the owners, as of last year. Well, final owners, true legal owners this year, but with a binding initial agreement last year. So tungsten looked like zinc. It's a critical metal, so I think there's at least some. It's not like we acquired like a gold heap leach project or something like that, right? It made some sense thematically. And tungsten is highly, highly topical, right? I mean, one of the U.S. Department of Defense's top 3 concerns on defense supply chains. Now they've mandated that the defense contractors in the U.S. cannot buy tungsten from China or Russia, which disqualifies almost 90% of the market, right? So there is no tungsten mine in North America. There should be, right? It's a bit of a weird metal that it's niche. you're competing with the Chinese, and they're not always operating on the same profit motives we are, right? So the price may be a little bit artificially low, but I think you're going to see in tungsten, rare earths, graphite, and metals like this that there's going to be a true bifurcation in pricing, and you're going to have prices for China origin metal, and you're going to have prices for metal that's not China origin, right? As you get these Western companies that have mandates to be not buying these critical things from China.
Interesting. You brought up the Department of Defense and Department of Energy as well, because funding is interesting, because they do dish out or send out checks, actually. Like Talon Metals got $120 million or so as well. What stage do you need to be in to qualify? Because I think Tung is almost there. Pass probably needs PFS, I'm assuming, to be eligible, I guess.
They generally prefer, they're not in the business of funding exploration projects, so it's typically that final step towards feasibility. So for example, the US DoD, probably the primary US department interested in tungsten, they can give you up to 50% under their Title III process of all expenditures that are kind of condition precedent to construction. So it'll be all our work basically until construction decision. So that's something very interesting to us, right? Like I think we want to maximize our ability to engage with government, and particularly through processes like that are I wouldn't say no strings attached, but very few strings attached.
I was going to say there's no dilution to shareholders, right?
So this is, I think, I never would have thought running a junior mining company that we'd be spending so much time engaging with government, but with this whole critical metals thing and the strategic nature of Mactung, and the infrastructure needs in our projects and stuff like that, like it's a huge amount of time, and we have a person on staff who's, he came in ostensibly for permitting stuff, but actually he's almost 50% now just lobbying efforts and that sort of stuff.
I was going to say, like, and humor me for a second, it's a personal interest. It's like, how do you liaison with the Department of Energy or Defense? Like, how does that work? It's not like you call up somebody in Washington, I guess.
You can, right? Like, so they'll have conversations with you, and I think laying the groundwork for any potential applications under their funding, programs through conversations is good. They're pretty.
So it's direct contact with them.
Yep.
So it's not through an intermediary or
no. But like they're through these processes, they have pretty strict rules about they can't have no coaching you and stuff like that, right? So it's they're they want to know who you are, they want to talk to you, but they're not going to handhold you through the process or anything like that. So it's interesting, and we engage in various levels of Canadian governments as well, from sort of territorial to federal and stuff like that, and
the territory is fantastic.
And you engage with both the political side and the bureaucratic side, right? So both of those relationships are extremely important.
Since you brought up government, I know that Yukon is trying to be quite I wouldn't say innovative is the wrong word, but progressive maybe in terms of infrastructure development, connecting to the BC grid, or power connection to the BC grid. They're trying to build some roads, at least that's in the plan. Like, where do we stand on those infrastructure projects?
So, in 2016, they announced this Resource Gateway project, which was a collaboration with the federal government for infrastructure to mining projects. We're starting to see, this takes time because there's environmental assessments and engagement with First Nations and MOUs to be signed and stuff like that. So we're starting to see deployment of that now on the bypasses, Carmax and on our own. They allocated $71 million to the access roads to our projects, and we're starting to see now like RFPs for that work appear on the government website. Which
RFP,
a request for proposal.
Okay,
it's basically like, hey, this has to get done. You're a company. Submit your proposal to do the work, right? So it's a official way to basically submit bids to do the work, right? So that's a great first step. That we're now.
Is there a timeline attached to that?
They've got a published timeline, but I'm assuming if they are putting out the RFPs now, they're expecting work to get started next year.
Okay,
right?
fantastic.
Yeah, and then there's bigger things at play, like the Yukon government has announced that they're looking at a grid connect to British Columbia. The Yukon grid is an island, right? So it generates all its own power. It does not import or export power. It's not connected to any other grid. So connecting to the BC grid would immediately solve the Yukon's power, issues, particularly around mining development. So
I was up in Dawson. They ran diesel generators in town.
Yeah, and you know, something like our project, Mactung in particular, could probably be powered off the grid. Mac Pass, if they add a few, you know, they've got a few run of river projects they're looking at, and pumped hydro, and like maybe there's some opportunity there.
Yeah.
But you look at like a big project like a casino. I mean, casino would draw as much power as the entire Yukon grid produces, right? So that's a non-starter. So a connection to the BC grid, you know, radically changes a project like casino and Western Copper's fortunes, right?
And greenifies things as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Well, we want to be the best mining, you know, companies in the world, and that means safest. It means lowest cost, and it means lowest carbon intensity, right? That's a new metric that's emerging, right? So we want to be big, low cost, safe, and green, right? And we can't do that without grid power.
Absolutely. And BC hydropower is cheap, but also green. It's just all water. Water electricity, I call it. So fantastic. I think last topic we need to cover real quick is permitting.
Yeah.
Are you fully permitted for Mactung Mac Pass first for exploration to this stage of development?
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to cover that real quick.
So we have a class 4 license on the Tom and Jason area. We have a class 3 at Boundary Zone. We'd like to eventually escalate Boundary Zone, we think.
You might quickly explain that, because I know that's a question I asked on the site visit.
A class 1 is the lowest class, and is kind of implicit with any mining claim in Yukon. That allows you to do really like work that doesn't leave a disturbance. So no roads or anything like that, but you can do drills as long as you completely clean up the drill site after.
Track-mounted stuff.
Yeah, right. So, and then class, you know, almost nobody uses class 2s, but class 3 and 4, it's like, okay, now we're talking a permanent camp or semi-permanent, right? You can leave it up over winter. Okay. You're talking like, you know, building to build roads and you know, that sort of stuff, right? So, full class 4 at Tom and Jason, which is gives us up to 150 person capacity in camps. We have a class 3 at Boundary, which has really just been a multi-season drilling license, the ability to leave pads and stuff like that over winter. We would like to eventually seek, once the new resource road rigs in Yukon are done, a permit to reopen the road to Boundary Zone, because there is a road there, but it just needs to be kind of cleaned up a little bit. But yeah, it's you know, Yukon's in a pretty great place to operate there in terms of permits. You know, I think about the poor souls in like the Arizonas and Nevadas that wait years for a drill permit. You know, a Yukon for a basic drill permit, like a class 1, it's a notification process, it's not a permit. You just notify, and kind of, you know, 2 to 4 weeks later.
Assuming you have a social permit, social license as well.
Yeah. If you don't have a social license, all bets are off, right? But yeah.
Okay, fantastic. I think that was quite comprehensive what we discussed here. Yeah. So next set of catalysts or results are probably the next news item.
Yeah, it would be. I think we'd have 1 or 2 sets of drill results in September, and drill results coming all the way through September, October, November, December.
Anything else we should be looking out for?
Obviously next year you've got a resource update on Mac Pass and the PEA on that. You've also got an economic study on Mactung due. We thought we might be able to get out before the end of this year, but I think we want to do a bit more metallurgy on that, so probably early next year.
Gotcha. Fantastic. Awesome. Brandon, thank you so much for joining us here in the studio. It's great to catch up, as always. Good to see you. And everybody else, thank you so much for tuning in. Truly appreciate you watching. Make sure to hit the subscribe button here on the channel, here Gold Newsletter. We're, as I said, relaunching this channel. We'll be bringing out a lot more mining content, a lot more mining-focused commentary as well. Follow me on Twitter, at @JRMiningGuy, and follow Brien Lundin, of course, as well, at Brien_Lundin as well. Great guy to follow. Lots of good content. So make sure to do that, and we'll be bringing you lots more content. Thank you so much for tuning in.